Hi, I'm Greg, and welcome to What's Old is New Again. Randall Carlson is one of the most intelligent people I have ever had the pleasure of meeting. He is a master builder and self-educated in many fields such as sacred geometry, catastrophism, and geology. I would venture to say his brain power is equivalent to any three of your average PhDs combined. The man can lecture for hours on such a wide variety of topics. There is a reason behind the phrase, all the Randall you can handle. But with that colossal intellect comes some big words, and while Randall does a good job of explaining them, it never hurts to have a review. So I would take some time to go over a few of these words or phrases so the next time you hear them, you will have a good familiarity with them. You will notice many of these terms are geological in nature, and with many of them, they are relatively easy to learn and just as easy to forget. So, if you really care to commit these to memory, you may wish to consider going over them a few times. As a teacher I once had liked to say, repetition is the mother of retention. So let's get into it. Squaring the circle. As Squaring the Circle is the name of one of Randall's podcasts, the other being Cosmographia, I thought this would be a good one to start out with. In episode 1 of Squaring the Circle, Randall describes it as drawing a circle and square of equal areas with only the tools of classical geometry, those being an unmarked straight edge and a compass. He also mentions something called the rectification of a circle and a square, that being a circle and a square of equal perimeter. Now, can you actually square the circle? No. This was proved in 1882 by mathematician Ferdinand von Lindemann. I won't bore you with the proof, which involves pi, its square root, and transcendental numbers. But why is it important? The circle represented heaven or the divine. The square represented earth or the human. Squaring the circle would somehow be a connection or a link between the two, sort of a bridging the gap. So if you want to see what that looks like, we can do a little bit of quick math. If we take a circle with a radius 1, we can easily calculate the area to be pi. Now for a square of the same area, you just take the square root of pi. So the square root of pi times the square root of pi for the two sides is pi, and there you have it. There's your diagram with the circle and the square superimposed, squaring the circle. Isostasy. Isostasy refers to the state of equilibrium between the Earth's crust and the underlying mantle. As the crust is less dense than the mantle, it floats on the mantle at a height determined by its thickness and density. When there is a heavy load such as a mountain or a glacier on the crust, it deflects downward. This can cause a mountain to have a root. The mantle beneath the load is pushed to the side, creating an upward buoyant force that pushes other parts of the crust upward. When the load is removed, the crust moves back upward. This is how a mountain can lose 50 feet off of its top and only lose a fraction of that in actual elevation. Isostatic rebound follows neatly after isostasy. Imagine a glacier depressing the surface of the Earth under its huge weight. Once the pressure is released, the surface of the Earth rebounds back to its normal state. That is isostatic rebound. Heinrich event. Named after German scientist Hartmut Heinrich, a Heinrich event was the massive and rapid discharge of icebergs from the North American Laurentide ice sheet in the area of the Hudson Strait into the North Atlantic Ocean, causing significant disruptions to ocean currents and the global climate. These surges are identifiable in sediment cores by large amounts of ice-rafted debris, which included small pieces of rock or dropstone. These dropstones were too large to have been carried by currents out into the middle of the sea where they sank, and so must have been rafted there on icebergs. Spelled Loess and pronounced Luss. This is a geological deposit of fine-grained sediment, primarily silt, that is formed by the accumulation of wind-blown dust. It is dominated by silty particles, typically 20 to 50 microns in diameter. For comparison, medium-grained sand is typically around 250 microns. There are smaller amounts of clay and sand. It is often rich in quartz and typically contains calcium carbonate, which acts as a weak cement. It is generally porous, lightweight, and friable. That means crumbly. When dry, it's cohesive enough to stand in steep, near-vertical faces, which is a characteristic feature in road cuts and natural bluffs. Luss is usually a pale yellowish-brown or buff color. It is notable for forming some of the world's most fertile agricultural soils. It forms highly productive soils because its composition and texture allows it to store large amounts of water and nutrients while being well aerated. Luss is an aeolian, wind-deposited sediment. The fine silt source material is often called rock flour. Much of the world's loess is glacial loess that originated during the Pleistocene ice ages, where glaciers ground rocks into fine particles. Meltwater rivers carried this sediment, which was then left exposed on vast dry floodplains when the meltwater flow decreased. Other sources include desert loess from deserts or other arid regions. Powerful winds pick up the fine exposed silt particles. The winds carry the dust over great distances, sometimes hundreds or thousands of kilometers. As the wind energy decreases, the fine particles settle out of the air and accumulate in thick, widespread blankets. Aeolian and lacustrine. These are two simple words I decided to bundle together on the same slide. Aeolian primarily refers to anything relating to or caused by the wind, like aeolian landforms or aeolian harps. It comes from the name of Aeolus, the Greek god of the winds, who I have never heard of before working on this video. In contrast, lacustrine refers to things related to lakes. Geologically, it describes processes, environments, or deposits related to lakes. Lacustrine environments are characterized by the deposition of sediments such as fine silts, clays, and organic matter in a relatively calm condition of a lake. These lacustrine deposits can reveal valuable paleo-environmental information which form under conditions different from marine environments, which tend to be more dynamic. Fluvial versus alluvial. Both refer to a river. Fluvial means of or pertaining to or formed by a river. Alluvial means pertaining to or composed of the deposits transported or laid down by a river. Fluvial refers to an active river and the processes within. Alluvial refers to the static sediment and deposits. Yes, there is some gray area here, but the key takeaway is fluvial is active and alluvial is static. Now, a good mnemonic trick is to relate the FL in fluvial to the flow. Drumlin. A drumlin is a streamlined, elongated, oval-shaped hill. They have a shape like a teardrop or an inverted boat hull. They are only found where glaciers once existed and are believed to have been formed beneath the ice by flowing water. They are composed of jumbled sand, gravel, and rock. These hills are typically oriented with their long axis parallel to the direction of the original water flow, with the higher, blunter end pointing upstream and the lower, tapered end pointing downstream. Drumlins often appear in large fields or swarms, sometimes numbering in the thousands, especially up glacier from major glacial deposits like moraines. Here's a Google Earth example of a drumlin swarm between Lake Erie and the Finger Lakes. Note it is only really visible in the terrain view of Google Earth. Zooming in shows more of their characteristic shape from above. Astrobleem. The word astrobleme means star wound and is the mark in a landscape made by a meteor impact, but is usually highly eroded and not as evident as a simple crater. It could be completely covered by soil or sedimentary rock. So an astrobleme is the scar on the earth, the impact structure or geological remnants of an ancient impact crater, while a crater is the visible surface depression itself, the hole in the ground. Syncline and anticline. An anticline is an upward arching fold of crust where the oldest rock layers are at the center, resembling an arch or an upside-down U. A syncline is a downward bending fold of crust where the youngest rock layers are at the center, forming a trough or a U shape. As these structures form together due to compressional stress on the Earth's crust, you most often find them in tandem, with anticlines acting as ridges and synclines as troughs or valleys. As in, synclines often form between two anticlines or vice versa. Again, both are the result of compressional forces in the Earth's crust, such as a plate collision. Yardang. A yardang is a streamlined, elongated landform, typically a ridge or hill, carved by the persistent erosive forces of the wind in arid or semi-arid regions. These formations are shaped by aeolian erosion. Aren't you glad we just learned this word? Where wind-carried sand and particles abrade and wear away softer rock and sediment, leaving behind the more resistant material aligned parallel to the prevailing wind. Perhaps the best-known yardang in the world is the one that was ultimately carved into the Sphinx on the Giza Plateau of Egypt. Palimpsest. A palimpsest is a manuscript or a document on which the original writing has been removed to make room for later writing, but where traces of the earlier work still remain. This practice was done because back in the Middle Ages, writing material such as parchment was expensive and hard to come by. Nowadays, modern technologies can help reveal the original text of a document, making many more of these pages come to light. One of the most famous of these is the Archimedes palimpsest, a 10th century Byzantine prayer book containing the only surviving Greek texts of Archimedes' Method of Mechanical Theorems and Stomachion, along with portions of On Floating Bodies. Note the original document was a copy of Archimedes' work, not something penned by his actual hand. Another example of a palimpsest is the section of writing in the Temple of Seti I. Now, this was done on a stone and not parchment, but the principle is the same. In this case, the overwritten segment looks like a helicopter and some other pieces of modern equipment. From an archaeological perspective, it can refer to where multiple cultures have inhabited a site over time, and you can see the remnants of an older culture beneath the more recent one. Randall and the Snake Brothers used the term in episode 108 of Cosmographia, where they are discussing part of the Newark earthworks, in which you can still see a circle and an octagon on a modern golf course. I have to throw a hat tip to Brad, who was the one that originally came up with the word. So there you have it. Some of the big words that you don't use in day-to-day conversation, but you could very possibly hear if watching Randall Carlson on YouTube or listening to a podcast. Hopefully you've learned a little bit, and next time he breezes through and you hear the words, you'll be like, oh yeah, I know what that is. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks for watching.